Turning cell phone off.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another Rowing Chat. I'm Rebecca Caro of Row Perfect, and today I'm joined by Tim Edsell. Tim, welcome to Rowing Chat.
Hi, Rebecca. Thanks for having me.
Now, please tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and your background in rowing.
Yes, I'm 55 years old. I live in Melbourne, Florida, where I began my rowing career with Florida Institute of Technology. I was a walk-on coxswain back in 1981, and that's how it all began as far as my introduction to the sport. And I apologize for the background noise, but there's an air show going on about a mile from me. So if you hear some jets flying overhead, it's okay. Everything's safe. I coxed at FIT for 3 years. During that period of time, I did win a national championship in one of our smaller boats. We had a really good, successful team back then under the coach by the name of Bill Juergens. And after I finished my senior year there, I actually got out of the sport. I went back to my hometown and then traveled and worked all around the United States. And then about 14 years ago, I decided I've had enough of this. I want to go back to Florida. And so I moved back to Florida. And one of my friends from back in the 80s was coaching the women's team. And he'd rouse me out of bed early in the morning when he didn't have enough coxswains and say, hey, get down here. And so I'd help out. But through me helping out with the women's team at that point in time as a guest coxswain, he heard some pretty good feedback from the rowers. And then in 07, he brought me out of retirement, and I raced at Masters Nationals, won Masters Nationals with him. And then I learned about the adaptive rowing part of our sport. I was oblivious to it in a way, although I was born with my disability. And that's how far removed from the sport that I was. And then I tried out, was selected for the U.S. national team back in 09 and was the adaptive coxswain in Poznan. And then I stepped aside from that and did a whole lot of masters coxing after that. And now I am currently a U.S. rowing referee. I run my own online e-learning website for coxswains. I mentor, I have a small group of coxswains that I do mentor, and that's where I am today.
Well, welcome back to rowing. What a valuable asset you are. Tim, I'd like to start with talking about your work as a referee, which in Europe we call an umpire. So you're umpiring races and ensuring that they're fair. And of course, you have a ringside view of everything that's going on down the racetrack. Tell me, how can you spot if the coaches are failing to teach their coxswains well?
There are several indicators. One of the first indicators is if you hear rowers telling the coxswain what to do. That's the biggest one right off the bat. After that, it's how the coxswain manages the crew, how they talk to their teammates, how they maneuver their boat. Is it easy for them to pull onto a stake boat or a starting bridge, or is it difficult for them? Are they capable of keeping their point when there's a crosswind? And do they have their rudder like in an 8? You can tell on the back of the 8 with on some of them, they still have the T-bar on the top. And do they have it cocked at an angle, or do they have it straight? So these are some of the little indicators that we as umpires / referees look for, because that makes us aware of, uh-oh, there's a crew that I have to be really aware of. And there may be issues in this race. And I'm specifically talking about sprint racing here. But there may be an issue in this race. I have to pay close attention to this crew and be prepared for them in case something goes awry.
So let's talk a little bit about, you used a phrase about being on point. Can you explain what that means? Because a lot of listeners won't be coxswains, but it'd be really useful to know what that means.
We call it keeping your point. That is, and it varies. On like a head race or a winding course and everything, the point is always changing from where you want the boat to go. And you get there by pointing your bow right at it. In a sprint race, there are some courses that are what we call dog legs, where there's a slight turn in it, like in Philadelphia on the Schuylkill. Their 2,000-meter course has a turn about 800 meters into it. But again, you have one point going into the bridge, and then as soon as you make your turn, then you have another point that you have to get to as quickly as possible. Well, when you're sitting on the line waiting for the race to start with the wind, because boats are normally 15 feet, or maybe 3 or 4 meters apart from each other, there's not a lot of room for error there. And that the boats will collide in a minimal amount of time, 2-3 strokes or whatever. And so it's important that the coxswain communicate with the rowers in the boat as far as, I've got my point. I'm pointing straight as I can keep this boat pointed. And that's where it comes down to good communication in between the coxswain and the rowers. And usually it's a good idea for the coxswain to, hey, it's a windy day today. I'm going to be using Joe, Billy to keep me and keep us pointed straight prior to even going on the water, to have those sorts of communications worked out. But when coxswains don't know how to, or crews do not know how to scull a boat, or do something like that, we call it sculling a boat. That's where you pass the oar from the person behind all the way to the person directly in front of them. When we as umpires / referees have to teach these crews how to do that, that shouldn't be our job, but that's our job of last recourse.
So this point, is it a fictional place, or is it actually a physical thing? Is it a tree, a rooftop, a building?
It can be those. On some venues, there is nothing at the end of the course, and it's just blue sky or a tree line or something along those lines, or it might be on a large lake. That again, there may be a mountain down there, but which part of the mountain are you supposed to be pointed at versus the point or the tip of the mountain?
So the coxswain in a buoyed course, can follow the line of buoys as they converge to a sort of vanishing point, and you can tell with your peripheral vision if you're straight. Is that correct?
Absolutely. There's several ways there when we're talking about going down the course. On a windy day, you may be blown to one edge or the other of your lane, and you can actually steer off the buoys by using the blades, or as you call it, the spoon, but we call it the blade. You can use that as kind of a guide. On other locations, you can, depending on the height of your rowers and the height of the coxswain seat, they can look like with their ears and find a point off the edge of their stroke's ear on one side or the other, and use that if there's like a tree, or like you mentioned, maybe a building or something like that. Some people make sure that they don't see anything. For example, go back to the tree. As long as I don't see that tree, I know I've got my point. So the rowers are blocking it for them, and so that's another way that they could maintain their point.
That's fabulous. Good. Now, if I'm a coach and I know that my crews could do with some help with coxing skill, can you give us some tips on where we should start with coaching or mentoring coxswains off the water?
There's a lot of really good resources out there in books that have been printed. There's the Coxswain Encyclopedia, the Down and Dirty Guide to Coxing, the Short and Snarky Guide to Coxing, which are really good. The thing that I'm finding is that it's hard to get these kids to actually read the books. So if you gave them the book and say, go read this, then you probably aren't going to have as much success. So in your own way, you can use these books as a guide to bring your program along. Okay, some people might emphasize, depending upon the season, they may want to emphasize one aspect of coxing over others. Here in the States, we start out usually our season basically starts out in August or September. And so with new coxswains, we need to give them the basics and make sure that they're solid in the basics, meaning knowing what the commands are, basic commands are, how to get the boat out of the boathouse, on the water, and back, and feel comfortable and let them know that they are in charge, that that's their whole role. And that's another big area for coaches is, and some coaches disagree with this, but if you look up the definition of the word coxswain, it says a person who is in charge of and sometimes steers a boat. So the word itself is, I'm dealing with some kids who are here in the States. We have some that are, 11, 12, 13 years old. That's kind of tough for them to recognize that they're the boss, and but if the coaches can help in laying that sort of a foundation, rowers, yes, they don't know what they're doing yet, but you need to help them get to that point to where they are. I'm going to help get them to where they recognize and are comfortable and they embrace that I'm in charge. I've got it. I know what I'm doing, and away we go. And you all can now row and not worry about hitting anything or me making a mistake or something along those lines. So there's some good books out there that go into a lot of detail. But I think that it really starts with, you have to start with a good foundation and just gently add to it, meaning like every month, maybe add a whole new concept to, all right, here's your role as a cox.
And Tim, you also take on one-on-one coaching and mentoring with coxswains. Where do you start when you have a new person that you're working with?
First thing I want to hear is a recording. Be it of a practice or hopefully a sprint race. And that's where I know where I need to go with each of my different private clients.
And what are you listening for when you first play back the recording?
Well, how much they're counting and how often they repeat themselves. Those are the two, as most of really good rowers and everything, we don't want a blabbering coxswain. We want somebody who is focused and is providing pertinent information to helping the boat move faster. And unfortunately, I don't know how many recordings are out there on YouTube and everything, but my guesstimate is 90% of them are worthless because you hear coxswains counting and screaming and doing all these things. And that's the last that really good crews are looking for. And then the other part is that if they repeat themselves, if they either say the same call 3 times in a row, or they keep on using the same calls throughout the course. Like I think a lot of us can think back to our days when, and I know I was doing it, I'm guilty. I counted out power 10 after power 10 after power 10. Those guys on the varsity team, I got moved up really rapidly. Those guys on the varsity team did not like that. They hung me from a tree. No, they didn't, but they felt like it.
And when a coxswain repeats themselves with an experienced crew, it's a sign to the crew either that they haven't made the change that the coxswain called for, or that the coxswain hasn't noticed that they've done what they were instructed, and then they feel that their efforts are worthless.
True. And that's one of the things that I encounter with my private clients is when they make a what I call a corrective or a technical call, that they have to give the rowers 2 to 3 strokes to actually implement it. Okay, because the body, it takes a while for everybody, and particularly when the body is under stress, as we all as the rowers experience as you go down the race course. Our thinking brain isn't working necessarily as well as our reptilian brain, which is just keeping us alive. So you have to give the rowers a chance to process what you just said. And that's another thing that I didn't mention this, but how fast are you talking? I mean, are you just blah, 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 or do you have a calm, clear, concise, confident sounding voice? That's another thing that I look for, that's an indicator of where I need to start with the coxswain and help them change their ways. And I look at it like this. I'm kind of like a computer programmer going in there and fixing a computer that has lots of viruses. And I have to weed out where those viruses are. And it's hard to do. Some of them don't go away.
So how do you attack the first virus? Say you've identified repetitiveness. What's the first thing you do as a coach?
First thing is making them aware of it. I ask them, I challenge them, I say, only say whatever you have to say once. Only say it once. And I have to come back and have to say that over and over. You're still repeating yourself. Why are you repeating yourself? What is going through your mind? Well, I feel as though I have to say something. The rowers say I have to say something on every stroke. Well, not necessarily. That's not true. Lesser experienced crews, yeah, they need that. They want to hear your voice. More experienced crews, not so much. So it's about making the coxswain cognizant of what they're doing. And over time, and it takes time, because if they start out with bad habits, it's already ingrained in their subconscious. And that's what I'm saying. I'm like trying to break up or get rid of viruses. Or another way to look at it is that, okay, they've carved this in stone and I'm having to go in and do masonry over it and carve new good things in stone. And so since things are so habitual from their subconscious, it's just making them aware of it. And most of them catch on to it a year or two later, but it takes a year or two to possibly break them of that habit.
It certainly does. Now, you and I have had a little conversation offline, which was prompted by an email that we received at Row Perfect from a lady called Tessa. And I'm going to read out her introduction. She says, I'm Dutch and I'm a member of a small rowing club that's only 4 years old, and we don't get much coaching because we're still a small group. So our coxswains have a double task in that respect. And she basically asks us, how could a coxswain learn to coach a crew as well as steering them? So I think this is a great opener, because before we go into detail, to what degree, once you've learned the basics of coxing, to what degree do you think a coxswain should also be a coach?
Tremendously. And in fact, I encourage all of my private clients to recognize that they are a, quote, junior coach, or meaning you have the head coach and he is the admiral of the fleet, or she. They are the boss. But once you are in that boat, you're in charge of that. Goes back to the definition of coxing. You are in charge. You are in charge of that boat. And the more you learn about the rowing stroke and the technique that the coach is teaching and everything, the more respect you are going to earn from the rowers, number one. Because when you become very good at being able to recognize when you're at, let's say, a 36 or 38, you can tell that somebody's a quarter blade late, or somebody is rushing their slide, or somebody is too quick with their hands out of the bow, and these sorts of things. It takes a while for the eyesight to develop there, but being able to recognize that and to call for that correction in the middle of the race could be all the difference in between placing ahead of that other crew or not.
So we have established that, and once you're experienced, the coxswain is also a coach. When you're beginning to get to that skill, so for example, when your steering is automatic and you don't have to think, push my right hand forwards or whatever, one of the ways that as a rower, I like the coxswain to coach is by having them repeat what the coach says. Once the coach has finished articulating something, by using the same words, do you find that a useful way for someone to start to learn the coaching instruction?
Yes, they should, but at the same time, they shouldn't be a parrot per se. Okay, and once they get the understanding of, okay, we need to turn up together. Well, what's a different way of saying turn up together? Is it roll? Another one is roll up together. We want to, because the monotony of saying the exact same thing over and over and over again, the rowers are going to tune you out. So one of the guides that I challenge my coxswains to do is they have to be able to make a corrective call 5 different ways. You know, not just 1, not just 2, but 5. And
give an example.
Yeah. Well, for example, if we have late catches, or our catch timing is not together. Let's start with our catch timing is not together. So one of the first, I would say this, I would say, okay, we're going to focus on our catches for 5. Ready? And I would pause to make sure I've got everybody's attention. A lot of coxswains go, ready, blah, instead of pausing and giving the rowers a chance to be ready. So I would say, all right, we're going to focus on our catches for 5. Ready, quick, sharp, arc it in, backsplash, match. That was 5 strokes. I was a little bit fast. We were going about a 50, but you know what I'm saying. That's how I would do it. And I wouldn't put filler information, what I call filler information in between those words. I just want them to focus on getting their timing together. And if that didn't work, I could follow up my next calls with, all right, I've got 6 out of the 8 together. Now I can work on these other 2 people individually and work with them.
So one of the things as a rower that I find challenging by coxswains is that oftentimes, unless you're a very well-drilled crew who've rowed together for a long time, when you call the word sharp at the catch, different people understand it differently. And I find it very helpful when the coxswain tells me how to be sharp at the catch. So lift your outside hand as you come forward over your toes or something like that. Do you also teach this?
Yes, I do. I was thinking more or less as if I were racing and how I would make the correction versus if I'm in practice. In practice, it's okay to be a bit more verbose and more detailed and descriptive in what you're looking for. And again, along those lines, we have to, okay, if we're going to get backsplash, how do we get backsplash better? What is it that some people go for backsplash, other people don't want to see backsplash? I'm just using that as an example. So if I don't want backsplash, I'd more or less use the word arc it in. Okay, imagine it's an arc. Think of a rainbow. Think of coming down into the water this way, versus if I wanted more of a backsplash and an aggressive thing, I could say jab it in the water. Okay, so you get to be, again, it's all about coxswains in this area, broadening their vocabulary, their realm of vocabulary of how many different ways can I say this to get it across to that person who's just not quite getting it. And it's tough. It's not easy.
So a coxswain has to be a really good linguist. And do you also advocate that they take their own written notes at the end of a practice so that they remember what was effective and, you know, what the 5-seat totally failed to understand, so that they can then try something different next time?
Yes, I do. And not only that, but if for those who have I call it the fortunate opportunity to be riding in the coaches launch, that's the best time to really learn and take notes and observe the different rowers' flaws or issues, whatever word you want to use, so that they have that information available to them. But yes.
Let's get back to Tessa. So Tessa is a coxswain without a coach in a coach boat. I'd like to start talking through the sorts of things that a coxswain can feel, see, and hear, which can then be translated into effective coaching. So let's start by talking about boat feel, and we're imagining we're doing a practice here, not a race. What does the coxswain feel while they're sitting in the steering seat?
That will vary depending on how well the boat is rowing well together. For most crews, you're going to feel what we call rush, and a residual or a component that comes along with that is what we call check, which is actually stopping the boat, basically putting the brakes on. You're almost going to feel that in all boats, and that's what we're always trying to eliminate, is the rush and the check. So the boat is just continually moving forward without any loss in momentum. So, and how do I describe rush? Rush is where they are longer through the water than they are on the recovery. So if, let's say we're rowing at about a 20, okay, so that's 3 seconds for every cycle. So if they're 2 seconds through the water and 1 second on the recovery, that's rush. All right. And when they're rushing, that's basically the seats are at their slides or their seats are out of control. And so they have to put on the brakes. And so they put all their weight and everything onto the foot stretchers. And that's what we call check, because they're now putting their weight into the foot stretchers, which is pushing downward on the boat, which is essentially applying the brakes, slowing their momentum down.
Can you feel this on your back?
Oh yeah, I've had numerous sores on my spine. And you can feel it if you're in a bow loaded forward. You'll feel yourself really getting rocked around when there's severe check. And for some people, the check actually, they're hitting what we call the front stops. They actually, when you're all the way up the catch, there you come up, they hit their front stops right there, and they hang. And at that moment, that's when all the weight is transferred into the foot stretchers and down in the boat, and you can feel the jerk. You can really feel it jerk when it's bad.
Great. So that's what a coxswain can feel. We'll go on to remedies later. What can a coxswain see and hear that can help with coaching?
Well, let's go back to the rush. You can hear if you're really paying attention and you're being quiet, and that's something I'd really encourage coxes to do, is to take 2, 3, 4 strokes off and listen to the boat. Hear what's going on. Hear if the oars are turning well, if the click of the oars and the oar locks are the same, or if they're off. But you can hear the wheels. It will start slowly, and the pitch will increase if there is rush. If the pitch does not change, then everybody's moving their seats at the same speed. So that's good news there. And I'm sorry, the other part was?
What can you see?
Oh, well, I think that's one of I'm going to do a little bit of a tangent here and come back. That's one of the most challenging things about being a coxswain is you have approximately 70 things that you're monitoring every moment that you're in the back of an 8. And the most intimidating of which are 8 oars. And are those 8 oars doing the same thing? But through paying close attention to what those oars are doing, you can discern what is going wrong in the boat. For example, you can pick out if one individual is rushing, you can tell about just the way that the shaft of their oar is moving in relationship to the other people on that side of the boat or with the rest of the boat. So there's a lot that you can tell. You can tell body positions. If people are dropping their shoulders going into the catch, that usually leads to skying. Okay. You can kind of tell if they're lifting with their shoulders or if they're shooting their tail, if the oar comes flashing forward instead of being at full reach. So there's a whole lot of, you can use the oars as a good diagnostic tool as to, what do I need to fix?
So what you're looking at is, are the oars parallel with each other on each side of the boat? And when one of them diverges, that's your clue.
Absolutely. And everywhere from the release to the catch. And in all stages, you can really tell well-coxed crews, because that's what I think a lot of people love about when they see really good rowing, is the synchronization is just almost perfect. You to the naked eye, you cannot see anything wrong with those crews, and they're just moving right along the water, gliding right along the water, and that's usually the sign of a really excellent technical coxswain. Somebody who really knows what they're talking about and can convey the information and get everybody to buy in and make the boat move well.
That's great. So we can identify some things to work on by feeling, seeing, and hearing. Now Tessa asks, how do you choose a remedy?
I go for the worst one. I start with what I consider to be the thing that's the biggest flaw in the boat. And then I work from there. The key is that, like, one person may be having a lot of trouble keeping their core solid, and they just haven't maybe developed the musculature so that they can really just relax as the hands come out away from the body and going into the catch. And so you can't come back. That person's going to wear out over practice and everything. So you can't be hammering on them all the time. So I go after the worst one first, but then I notice 3 or 4 or 5 other different things. And so I kind of bounce around the boat. So nobody is my whipping post, quote unquote, all the way for the whole practice. There are usually plenty of other things that we can find, that we can work on to address, and it may relate to the drill that the coach has us focusing on. If he wants us to slow the top 3 inches, all right, well, we'll only focus on the top 3 inches. But if we're going out and doing a long, steady state row, let's say for like 60 minutes or something like that, that gives me the opportunity to work on all sorts of little things here and there.
So Tim, do you have a preference when working with a new crew to coaching everybody simultaneously or picking out individual athletes?
I firmly believe on working with everybody in the beginning. And something that I've been researching recently that I'm getting my clients to start using is the power of positive calls. So before I say anything that's going to be in the negative realm, I want to find out what we're doing right. And I want to start emphasizing, okay, we've got this going very well. We've got that going very well. All right, we can improve on this. But I want to start out with a positive tone to practice. And a lot of psychology research is now pointing to and I'm not saying positive as far as, oh, you all are great, and oh, la, 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 puppy dogs, rainbows, and butterflies. No, I'm not talking about blowing smoke. I'm talking about, yeah, we are doing this very well. Let's maintain this, and we're going to improve on it by doing whatever it may be.
That's so true. I have had a long discussion with Duncan Holland, who's also been a RowingChat guest, about positive calls. And his example is, instead of saying, Tim, don't square late, you say, Tim, square early. So you flip it over to telling them an action they can take instead of an action you do not want them to take. But you can say the same thing, but the effect is different.
Exactly. And even along those lines, for example, I hammer into my private clients to drop that word you just used, don't. Because actually, when a body is under stress, and this, again, it's been proven psychologically in studies and everything, that we ignore the word don't and we do what's afterwards. So that's one of the things I look for in those recordings, going back to those recordings, is, are they saying don't? They are. And are they saying can't? They are. Those are the first two things I really go after them, is you have to stop saying this. But it does make a difference in how you phrase things to the rowers and how it is interpreted, particularly when, as the race wears on, when you're in that last 1,000 meters, your neocortex, the basic mammalian brain, is really shutting down to get through there. Some people see colors, some people, it goes to tunnel vision, it can go whatever, and that your voice is their lifeline at that point. So you got to be really good and clear and concise to get the information through to them.
That's a really great point. And I actually wrote a blog post a little while back about Pete Cipollone, the American coxswain, talking about coxing the Olympic final in Athens in 2004. And I transcribed some of this video, which he recorded. I can't reproduce the video because it's on the Olympic channel and it's copyrighted, but he described how they were halfway, they nearly had clear water on the field, he was feeling positive, it was all looking good, and then the 7-man comes forward and just goes, Dutch! Like that. And he looked over and he's like, shoot, this Dutch 8 suddenly came up on us and I hadn't even seen them coming. And he had to change his entire race plan in order to keep the crew focused and not obviously to hold off the Dutch.
Yeah, and and that's, you bring up an interesting point there, and that's why Pete was such a very good and excellent coxswain, is that as a coxswain, again, of those 70 things we have running through our mind every moment, is that race plan, and you may have to have 3 or 4 different race plans, and particularly at the high level, like collegiates, championships, and those sorts of things, to be prepared for what these other crews might throw at you. Yeah, particularly when you're in front, because if you're in front, it's not always as easy as you think it is, because those others are gunning for you.
Right. So back to Tessa's question. Just to summarize so far, we've talked about boat feel, what the coxswain sees and hears, some remedies and how to communicate them. Now she asks us, how do you use exercises and drills to reinforce these technical changes?
I come up with I use the drill portion as an opportunity for me to broaden my vocabulary. I'm still, again, I'm back to the point of having many different ways of getting them to adjust to the correction that you need or you want. We have to have the different ways to do that. And the only way to get a good feel for if things are being successful or not is by trying new things while you're doing these drills. And then getting feedback from the rowers was that after the practice was over, or if the drill was over, did you like that or did you not like that? And then if not, what would you suggest that I say differently, or how would you suggest that I say differently? Again, with a lot of coaches, they only go out for practice and they only want to focus on correcting one item at a time. We can't be confusing the rowers. So if you're out there and you're by yourself, it's easier to just focus on one thing, have a theme for the whole practice. The whole practice, our theme is going to be our catches matching. Now you may be working on different things like a rush and blade heights and some things like the recovery heights and some things like that. But the overriding theme is staying on point with, we're going to do this drill to work on this part of how we can have better catches. So that's what I would suggest, Tessa, is to just pick one theme for the practice, and then you can have 3 or 4 different drills that reinforce how to do that correction or that piece of the stroke that you're working on. And in those 3 or 4 different drills, that's where you as a coxswain, you have all the freedom to work on your linguistics and see what you can do to make it happen better.
As a coach, I often take the exact same approach that you just described, but there's a couple of progressive things that, Tessa, you might also find helpful. One is start with the drill. Ensure on the land before you start, everyone understands how to do the drill and the words that you will use to call it. And then when you've done your warm-up or whatever and you're ready to do it for the first time, do it, and do it for 10 or 20 strokes, no more, and then back into regular normal rowing. And then do the drill a second time and see if the crew execute it more skillfully, and then do it a third time. And I generally find that it's the third time that the crew begins to appreciate the thing that you want. And if they aren't successful, try dropping out a pair of rowers. So you have someone holding the boat steady and maybe only 6 or 4 people rowing. Now, the drill has its greatest benefit when you can get the rowers to make that change in the regular normal rowing that they have practiced in the drill. And so your skill with the words, as Tim has described, in taking the words that describe the successful outcome and adding that into a call that you can do when you're just doing normal steady state paddling. So as Tim said, perhaps getting our catch timing together. The word we're going to use is squaring early and lifting up. Very simple. And as you are then doing normal rowing, squaring early and lifting up on this one now, and then let them do that for 10 whole strokes with you saying nothing else. Lift up, lift up. You don't have to say it every stroke because I'm not a coxswain. I'm way too heavy. And that helps you to teach the rowers how to transfer what you practiced in the drill into the normal rowing stroke. And then you then have a very clear transition from doing the exercise 3 times, putting into practice, and then maybe later in the outing you might do the exercise again, but this time only for 10 strokes or maybe only for 5 strokes, just to reinforce the technique and then straight back into the normal rowing.
Yeah, I wish more coaches would do that because I like the approach in that you're doing the drill and then you do a little bit of steady state and then you come back and do it again and do a little bit of steady state. I don't hang out with a whole lot of coaches. I don't get to see a whole lot of crews, but I'm just saying that I can see where that would be a good approach to address the issue that you're working on. And also, I like in there is that's right. The coxswain doesn't need to say something on every stroke. Believe me, the rowers will live. Yeah. They'll be there. And when you are silent, that makes them pay a little bit more attention to what you do have to say.
Exactly.
So yeah, the power of silence, it's really effective.
The other thing that I think, Tessa, you'll find useful is to have an objective and subjective measure of how successful a drill or a practice or something has been. And the simplest way is to say, right, I'm going to give you points out of 10 for how well we did that drill, right? You got a 6.5. And then we're going to do the drill again, and I want you to increase that. And then the other way you can do it is when you stop in the practice, maybe to have a drink or to turn around, ask the crew to give you their scores, or they can just call them out as you're rowing. Say, right, starting from bow, I want you to call out points out of 10 for how well we did that drill, and have everyone just call the number. And so that's your subjective view of how well the drill went. Then the objective drill is that you need to have a boat speed measurement tool in your cox's seat. And so the Coxmate GPS or a Nelson Kellerman speed coach, something that tells you how fast the boat is going. And so you can say this changed or this did not change based on an objective measure. And so I think that will also help you get the crew to be critical about their own skill at executing what you want, and to get them involved in the common pursuit of raising your 6.5 score to a 7. That also helps.
Absolutely. That's a good approach. And I encourage coxswains to do that. Maybe the subjectiveness, not as much, but after a piece, let's say you do a 3-minute pieces or something along those lines. If you've got enough time in between the pieces, that they start and they get feedback from the crew themselves is, okay, what do we need? What went right and what went wrong in that piece? And give the rowers a chance to express themselves, so it's not just 1 or 2 people dominating the conversation, which can happen in a boat, but actually call them out individually. Hey, Bill, what did you think of that? Hey, Joe, what did you think of that? Hey, Sally, what did you think of that? However it may be, so that there's more understanding within the boat, and usually it will come to a consensus. Yeah, we all need to really work on this, and it works very well.
Yeah, it's also one of the biggest differences between coaches in the United States and coaches in Europe. In the United States, the coach is boss, and you don't ever say or question or anything. He says jump, you say how high. That's the only thing. In Europe, there's a little bit more of a consensual feedback where the coach actually asks the crew what they thought, not telling them what he or she thought. And I think that coxswain role can sit between the coach. You're not asking the coach to change, but the coxswain then can have that feedback role with the crew, and then can take responsibility after the practice to take that back to the coaching team.
Well, I've noticed this. I was out with the team this past week. I think you might be surprised that now it is changing over here in the States, where a lot of the coaches are talking to the rowers and say, what did you notice about this, and or the coxswain? They are the younger coaches. Maybe it's the old schools that aren't, but the new kids on the block and everything like that, they are using that approach with the crews these days. So I won't say it's everywhere, but I'm noticing it in more places more frequently than what I used to experience.
Brilliant. Well, on that note, Tim, I'd like to move forward to have you share your screen with us, because part of the joy of getting Tim on a video call is that he can then show us his coxswain school. So while you're just pulling that together, Tim and I first met because I discovered his website, and I got in touch because I had never seen an online resource specifically directed toward coxswain training and education. And for me, I'm always keen on the rowing education. Row Perfect's all about education. And seeing that there was something new coming over the horizon, we had an initial chat, and Tim is a perfectionist. I'm going to say that out loud. I didn't tell him I was going to say it. And he said, no, I want to redesign the whole thing. So you're not allowed to have a rowing chat with me until I've done that. So now the time's good. Tim, are you ready to share your screen with us?
One moment. Okay, yeah, it just came up. I wanted to bring up one further thing. So I'm gonna share my screen. I'm gonna show 3 things. I'm gonna give them the front page, what it looks like, and then I will go into the other. I have 2 courses out here. One's a novice course, and the other one's an intermediate course. And some people have asked, well, why don't you have an advanced course? I was all, well, what's advanced to you and what's advanced to me? No, I'm not going there. Let's just try to get these aspiring great coxswains good information in a format that they can find useful. And with the way what even brought this whole idea about was technology. Everybody's on their smartphones, on their tablets, and all the rest of this stuff. And now, for all the coaches and the coxswains out there, there's no excuse. The website exists. It could be a rainy day. It could be a snowy day. Your coxswains are sitting around. You can send them, quote, school, the coxswain school, and they can continue their education. So, and part of it came from, I heard a lot of garbage out there. And as a referee, I was noticing, really, I don't remember being like that sort of stuff. but so pervasive in the novice and the freshman and even some varsity coxswains. I was all, really? You know, they sound like this and they're in the varsity 8 championship race. What can we do to help improve the level of coxing? And so that's why I developed Coxing School. So if you'll hang with me here, I'm going to switch over. I'm going to hit my little button here, and this, and here we go. All right, you got that?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm not quite finished with being a perfectionist on this site, but basically this is where we are. Here's the front page. And in here, what I've done to give everybody out there who is interested, I have a 5-minute demo that actually walks the individual through the course itself. So there's a novice coxswain introductory video, immediate coxswain introductory video. And then also the other thing that I do help out with, because I know how tight money is for everybody, is that if you have 3 or more coxswains and you're a team and all this stuff, I do offer discounts. Now, one of the cool things in working with Rebecca here and everything is I am going to do a 50% discount for the whole month of April for anybody who wants to enroll in Coxn School. So, and how that comes, sorry about that, one of my overhead neighbors. So how that happens is if you enroll, as you will see, normal subscription price is $100. I've dropped it to 50, and whoa, that was close. And the intermediate course is 75. Now the intermediate course builds upon the novice course. There's just so much information out there, and I'm trying not to overwhelm the aspiring great coxswain. So in the intermediate course, you do have access to all of the material in the novice course. All right. Now, real quickly, I am going to go into the novice course. And here we have a little announcements like the website was being upgraded, blah, blah, blah. A little welcome. And then here are the actual topics that we cover. And as you will notice, the novice course is structured. Okay.
Tim,
yes.
The screen hasn't refreshed off of the home page.
Oops, my bad. Let me try again. How do I get back? One moment. Okay, I'm learning. Now I will try a different application window. Let's try this one. There, how's that?
You need to reshare the screen again.
Oops, I thought I did.
Yep, you did.
Okay, just a little delay there. Okay, let me scroll back up here. All right, so now we're in the novice course. And over here, I have different announcements and upcoming events and all this other stuff. And then, but here is the material itself. And as I was commenting, I have structured the novice course to go in sequence, in my opinion, as to how the season goes along. Most important thing a coxswain has to learn is water safety. So I'll start out with water safety, talk a little bit about what it means to be the good psychology of a coxswain. Then we get into the basic vocabulary, terminology, and phrases. This is all stuff that, you know, all coxswains should learn within their first 2 weeks, is to get through here. And then you will notice that these things are, quote, hidden because you must complete all of these quizzes above. And that's what's kind of unique is I've given clinics before and have been on panels with lots of coxswains. And how do we really know that our coxswains have learned the material? That's another reason why I created Coxen School. Is the best way to know is to actually quiz them. So there are embedded quizzes, like there's a water safety quiz, and there's a steering quiz and a docking quiz, but you can't get to steering until you finish these. So I go into steering, I go into docking, I go into the rowing stroke technique and balance. And if I go in here, for example, oh, I can't do this under this. I'll do this in a different location. I talk about your voice and the components of your voice and how to use your voice. And again, this stuff, I don't want coxswains jumping ahead. I want them to come through and understand all of these components as it's laid out as we build through the season, what it means to be a practice coxswain. I do have a section here on the U.S. rowing rules. And like any sport, it's a good idea to know the rules, because even in our sport, there are some gray areas. And when you know those gray areas, you can take advantage of that. I go into what it's like to be a race day coxswain. And all the things, what I call race day is everything from loading the trailer to racing to coming back and unloading the trailer. And I've got videos and recordings and all sorts of embedded material underneath these different sections. And then I finish it off with a final exam. I want to be sure that anybody who gets through here is a competent coxswain at this level. Okay, so that's what I do for the novice course. Now, if you'll bear with me while I go to a different, and I think I'll get this. I can do this one better, and I'll show more material. Oops, here we go. Let me go that way, and I'm coming back. I will be sharing shortly. Share. Thank you. No, this one. There we go. Okay, Rebecca, can you see that? Or let me know when it pops up.
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay, now we're in the intermediate course. Okay, and now I'll be able to give better demonstrations. Again, now the intermediate course is totally open. You can pick and choose what you feel as though you need to work on. Okay, but again, I'm building off of the components of and there are some repeats in here because I consider an intermediate coxswain somebody who's made it through their first year. So they may not need to go back into the novice course, but they may not be a really good practice coxswain. So I've added, I had the practice coxswain topic moved over into here. But when I come into this area, like becoming a technical cox, now I'm being more specific and I'm getting into things like coaching your crew. And we'll take a quick look in here. Oops, no, we won't. I've got that blocked. Sorry. Oh, I just goofed up. One moment, please. There. One moment. Ha. One moment, please. Technical difficulties. I need to go on tester. There we go. Okay, back to where we were. So I come in here and I go into more details, and this gets more into the things like rush and check and rowing it in and those topics in there. A big thing that I'm really strong on is advanced boat maneuvering. A lot of coxswains just say, hey, we're going to bow take a stroke, twos take a stroke, and all that stuff. Well, there's some really cool ways that you can maneuver your boat out of tight situations by having certain people row and certain people dock. In fact, there's one time I had a boat up against the wall nearly, and I just had one side row it away. All four oars rowing, while the other side, the other four oars were flat on the water, keeping the boat balanced, pull them out of danger. There was one point I was pinned against the dock, and I had to have 6 scull 5, 4 scull, or 6 scull 5, 4 scull 3, 2 scull bow, and 8 back to get me out of a bad situation. So again, these are some of the things that I go through in advanced boat maneuvering skills. How to evaluate your recordings. There are simple ways to do it, and then there are advanced ways to do it. When you start talking about getting on the national team here in the States, they actually count how many words per second you're saying, and the ratios of good calls versus bad calls, if they're motivational calls or intermediate call or informational calls or technical calls. I give examples and templates on how you can do that. Being a coxswain, you're a leader, as we talked about earlier when I gave the definition of a coxswain, you know, and how to evolve into a leader. I was lucky. I was in the Boy Scouts here in the United States, and I was an Eagle Scout, and so, you know, I had the leadership stuff down. I just didn't know how to steer a boat. And then how to motivate and how to inspire your crewmates, and the difference between the two, and so you can make your calls more effective in communicating and getting what we want out of the crews. I also think it's a really good idea that the coxswains know their boats, and so I have links in here for all the different manufacturers and their equipment. And then once again, I get back, do another repeat of the rowing rules. They may not have been in the novice course, so they may not know it. And then there's a nice little excerpt in here of being a better racing coxswain from the book Flatwater Tuesday, which I thought was a really interesting, there's a lot of controversial stuff in that book, but the race itself, there's about 2 minutes of it, or 3 pages of it. It's just a coxswain that is what I consider to be spot on, and it was really neat to see what Mr. Irwin did and how he described what the coxswain is. So I kind of share that with those coxswains who might not really get what it means to be an aggressive racing coxswain. Then I'll finish it up with another final exam that covers both courses. So lots and lots and lots of material in here.
That's fantastic. Now, could you tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you if they'd like to connect with you after this podcast?
Absolutely. The website is www.coxswain.school, coxschool.com. And then they can contact me directly. My email address is tim@coxswanschool.com. And I can address any questions, concerns, and interest that they may have.
That's fantastic. Tim, thank you so much for agreeing to come on Rowing Chat. We've covered an enormous amount of ground. Tessa, I hope you feel your initial questions have been answered and that Coxn School could provide you with a really good framework for your own personal development as a coaching coxswain. And let me again thank all you listeners and ask, if you've enjoyed listening to Rowing Chat, please leave us a review in iTunes, in Stitcher, on YouTube, so that others can get to know how good Rowing Chat is as the rowing education resource. Till next time, I look forward to being with you again. Bye-bye.